Yep.
This is kink for trauma therapy.
Wow.
But kink is the modality.
This is what I've been interested in since the very dawn of
I'm here. BDSM stands for all the stuff in the middle. What about the stuff that's on the sides?
You're saying it really good?
Oh, okay.
No, you're saying it very well.
Good thing I'm neurodivergent and will repeat it word for word.
That's amazing. Oh my.
We found the right people.
I was just going to say she your new BFF because I think so.
I didn't even get to talk about there's like a giant
What's up, sinners and saints?
This is Boudoir After Dark.
This is the podcast about sex, kink, desires, and all the things people whisper about but rarely ever say out loud.
And we're constantly blown away by how many different ways humans experience pleasure, identity, intimacy, and power.
We're here to ask the questions that sometimes people might be too afraid to ask, and then challenge the bullshit assumptions that we've all been taught.
So if you're here to learn, unlearn, and maybe question a few things you thought you knew,
Welcome to Boudoir After Dark.
quick note before we get into it.
This podcast is intended for mature audiences,
We are not giving medical or legal advice.
or mental health advice, or professional counseling.
If you need personal help, please talk to a qualified professional.
This episode is for education, storytelling, and entertainment.
Let's get into it.
Boudoir After Dark. This is me. This is me.
I hate this candle holder. And I know you told me not to put drippies in it because it makes it wobble more, but it's already wobbling, so I'm putting drippies in it. I'll go ahead and
I like that you call it drippies.
I don't know.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. I'm Jason,
I'm Hilda.
and Hilda is currently dripping drippies into the
yeah.
candle.
Not in a kinky way, but in a...
Sadly.
Yeah.
And we just learned about candles, so hopefully we'll have someone on the show soon. But that's not important. What is important is today's guest, who is a sex educator with over 15 years of experience in the kink community and specializing in marginalized kinks and neurodiversity. I got that
had
whole
it.
thing with
Almost.
looking at the camera. But really what's important, Alice, thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness. No, thank you. Like the first conversation you and I had in the email, we were bouncing back and forth about academic terms and like psychology and stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm already in love. So I'm dying to jump into this conversation.
Welcome to the jungle.
Where do you start with something like a mouthful, neurodiversity?
There is, like where do you begin this journey, even for yourself? Like where does this come into play with your own story? Like how did you get into this line of work?
Oh, that's such a great question. Before I tell that story, and maybe it's the way my brain works, I'll just define like neurodiversity, right?
Thank you.
That would make more sense, yes.
It's a term born out of the 1990s, I think 1995, by Judy Singer. And it really represents a pushback on, at the time, essentially like the sort of diagnostic criteria of things like autism, ADHD. And what Judy Singer was saying is that neurodivergent minds are just neurodivergent minds, and that kind of diversity can be seen anywhere, just like we have diversity in cultural experience, racial experience, that not all minds work the same way. And so it's sort of a destigmatization of what it means to function.
I read a really good book recently called Neurotribes. And it was about like the history, like before neurodivergency was even considered a topic, or autism was even a topic. They were going back and looking at historical cases of like very, very intelligent people.
Yeah.
And then how it came today where it's like, okay, there's billions of spectral aspects. And I know autism was basically founded on two different ideas. One idea was you had to hit all these exact, was it 7 or 8 different cues? And the other one is like, no, that's bullshit. There's billions of possible combinations out there.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely wonderful. So you fell into like why did you choose
You were doing
neurodivergency?
such good educating there. You had me for
Sorry.
a second. You had me thinking as you were kind of talking about diagnostic criteria and how you have to meet like all of these different, components to be given an official diagnosis. That, I have been interested in sex education since my undergraduate degree, which I did in clinical psychology. But I was, even at that time, just like wildly interested in human sexuality. and then went on to then get my like social work degree. And so my entry into like the kink world was already just kind of from a lens of like wanting to be kind of collegiate about it. So I know across your show, a lot of people have named like kinky college, right? And
right.
I also found kinky college, but I found that because I just like Googled like college level kink education.
No
and literally
way.
found it, which is kind of perfect for me if you know anything about me. So
Wow.
I mean,
okay.
it's checking a lot of boxes off at one time. That's funny. So not only is it about the neurodivergency, but a marginalized kinks, I think, is what drew my attention the
Yeah.
most. What would be considered a marginalized kink?
So if you think of kind of like a bell curve, right? And kink, like everything, has kind of that middle point where a lot of things tend to look a lot like each other. Even the sort of initialism, BDSM, like that is the majority of kink experiences, but it's certainly not all the kink experiences.
Correct.
Definitely.
It's bondage and discipline, it's dominance, submission, it's sadism and masochism. But there's so much that it's not, so many things that exist in that tail, the sort of taboo. And that's the stuff that like I'm very interested in.
Okay.
Both personally and professionally.
What are some of those examples?
So the one that I teach a lot about, if you were to find me in a sex educating space, is age play and dark age play, pet play. And then of course there's like more colorful edge play things like water sports and things like that.
What's dark age play?
That's a great question. You know, all labels are subjective, right? So I would say,
Right.
like, what's dark age play to you? What does
Okay.
that term mean to you?
Okay.
The way that I've come to understand it is, you know, from my perspective, it's any kind of age play that essentially has like a sexual connotation to it, or maybe even a non-sexual but still dark connotation to it.
Okay.
So if we're into the realm of doing things that are maybe aimed at a more corrective experience or like revisiting kind of old trauma, that could be in a dark age play space.
Oh,
Okay, because can you also define age play for someone who doesn't
Yeah.
know what that is?
So age play is a type of play between two consenting adults. That's very important for the play itself. That to me uses caregiving as the play dynamic. So who is going to be taking less care of themselves and who's going to be taking more care of the other person. And you can do that lots of different ways, but there's usually a thorough line of that running through
Gotcha.
all different types of age play.
that's a very interesting way of putting it. All the definitions I've seen and other people I've talked to haven't put it that exact way, and I think that's really compelling. As you said, who's going to take less care of themselves?
Yeah.
Can you explain like what that means?
It could look like a lot of different things. One of the things I teach in my sort of age play basic class, my 101, is that when you enter this type of play, right out of the gate, most people will see that there is kind of this approximation that they're doing in age to like become something different than what they are, older, younger, what have you.
Okay.
Or it might also speak to that internal regressional state that people go into when they engage in the play. Now, not everyone experiences age regression, and both parties, you know, have the right to exist in the age play world. So I kind of distinguish between those two things.
So
Okay.
is there age play where people just do like a mental regression and they don't physically dress up or act out?
There's I don't know if those people would say I'm playing with age, but I think that there are age regressors who
But most people go with like the whole, looking the age that they're trying to project, correct?
I go back to that bell curve because there's so much variety, even within the age play context of itself. When I define the term for my students, ABDL, which you'll hear a lot, it stands for adult baby diaper level. But those two things aren't mutually exclusive. You could have someone who wants to feel like an adult baby and, regress down to a nonverbal state, but they have no desire, want nothing to do with a diaper. They don't like the way it feels on them. They don't want to be defecating or, whatever. And then you can have someone who just like really loves the sensation and the feel of a diaper, but wants nothing to do with being infantilized like a baby. They just want to wear a diaper because that's their fetish. So these two things can exist and oftentimes do together, but they can be completely separate from one another. Wow. Did I just go on a tangent unrelated to your
No,
question?
No,
it's
that
just
was
perfect.
great.
It's
Yeah,
perfect.
That makes sense. Okay.
So you
Yeah.
can have people who experience age regression in their play,
Mm-hmm.
and you could have people who never feel like their internal experience is regressive,
Mm-hmm.
but they still appreciate having like a daddy dom little
Mm-hmm.
dynamic.
Fucking fascinating. Okay.
I've never heard of dark age play.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your terminology or is that a colloquial term?
No, it's definitely not just mine because I went into the sort of kink world and I did like an age play class and I wanted something that was going to do more. So I think it's the way that a lot of sex educators sort of break their content into like a 201 level or 102 level offering, because a lot of times when we are talking about age play, some folks who come to that space just don't want a sexual connotation with it. And so a lot of times age play 101 or the introductional material, it's going to leave sex out.
Yeah.
And then dark age play is a space to say, okay, we're going to start getting really mature with some of these topics.
And I was actually surprised that there is age play with no sex. I thought that's why it kind of made me very uncomfortable, because I thought that, coming from a vanilla world, it's so taboo. And of course, like, you're going to be doing all the things that people don't want to think about, but now it makes so much more sense. Okay, thank you.
Do you see that as like a common occurrence? Because like when she brought that up the first time,
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of baffled. I'm like, well, just let them do their own thing. Like if they're happy and then
Oh,
consenting.
absolutely. And just to clarify,
Right.
that was just my only limit when it comes to photographing it.
Yeah.
That was my only request, that there's no sex in the age play, because being a mom, I think that would really bother me, although I'm not sure.
I was
But
just going to say, like, when we talk about, like, okay, have you guys heard this term yet? Changing the channel, or this idea of like not yucking anyone's yum.
yes.
That's my
yes.
life motto.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
like the same sort of golden rule of the kink space, right?
Correct.
Is like, if you see something in the kink space, just look the other way, just change
Correct.
the channel,
Yeah.
because we're all
Change the
here communally to do this
Absolutely.
sort of exhibition or voyeuristic
Oh, 100%.
thing.
Yeah.
But then
also,
at the same time, what is more of an antithesis to your like sexual buzz, but having a baby rattle or seeing these sort of paraphernalia that remind you immediately
Exactly.
of,
or
motherhood.
triggering a trauma.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and just like I definitely don't want to yuck anyone's yum. At the same time, I don't want to be exposed to something that I can't unsee, that's forever going to like trigger me in some way, because, who knows? Because my brain's weird.
I think it's an interesting point. I think it does bring us kind of full circle to that sort of idea of the bell curve and how these things do live in the sort of tail ends of it, kind of for a reason, but also, as you have seen in some of the kink spaces, it's becoming more normalized, I think more affirmed, to like see the parts of us in that play that aren't really harming anyone and that don't sort of ignite an immediate trauma.
Yeah.
I think you see a lot more stuffed animals in the dungeon nowadays, and there's even places, right, where these conventions will actually give space and time.
Yeah, there was a room. There was an age play room that
Yeah.
I actually wanted to go and see it out of pure curiosity, because I've
And
never had.
I actually held her back
Yeah,
because
he said
I
no.
thought if they're in a room that's closed off, maybe intruding on that room would be hazardous to them, and like that would totally mess up their
Oh yeah,
time.
so you were like, well, we don't want to like sort of yuck their yum.
Yeah,
by being
exactly.
Like, what are you doing?
even
in
just
there?
by looking.
So
yeah.
would that be? Did he make the appropriate decision?
No, I mean, I would say go in the room. Yeah, like just like some of the other spaces that exist in the convention world, like it's meant to be shared.
Okay.
And I mean,
Okay.
the
My
same
bad.
way you would in the main dungeon space, you're not going to start asking like, "What's that?" or
Oh,
"What's
no,
this?"
no,
but you're just
no.
like observing
Yeah.
from a distance.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've seen some other plays that were kind of like, whoa, that's really interesting, but we're going to keep walking.
Yeah.
Because like
What kind of stuff do you think is in the little room?
To me, toys,
toys and cribs and stuff,
like coloring books,
yeah.
things that like, if you're surrounded by the feeling that you want to have, like that's what I would
Yeah.
imagine would be there. I honestly didn't think there was anything devious. I just didn't want to take someone out of their headspace.
And I didn't think there was anything like that either. I was like, I feel like I want to know more, but I'm scared to ask, if that makes sense. Okay.
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head in terms of what kind of stuff. There's definitely toys in there. And since we're kind of doing this intersection between kink space and the neurodivergent space, there are a lot of things in there that just have a really pleasant sensory experience.
yeah, it's a good
So
texture.
absolutely a ball pit in there. Or just have
Now
like...
you're sad you didn't go, huh?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want to intrude on especially
fair.
on the objects. That
Yeah.
would be like almost sacrilege.
That's okay. So what happened the first time I walked into like an age play curated space is kind of that moment of like that pure like inner child sort of
Yes.
fronting to the very forefront of my personality, because I saw like, I'm dating myself, but like a 1980s Fisher Price dollhouse that I
get
was
it.
like, that's my dollhouse. How did it get here? I have to get down and investigate the dollhouse. And all of a sudden I was just in the mindset of, you know, the nostalgia of it all.
I love that.
And so that's a really big part of the root of, I think, why people are drawn to that space in general, is to approximate a return to something that maybe they didn't get enough of or want to have again in the real world.
Wow.
Adult world.
This might be off topic, so please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm a big nerd. I have a Star Wars tattoo
Is
on my
that a
back.
D20 on your
It
hat?
is a
I
D20
couldn't
on my
tell.
hat. Didn't realize what hat I was wearing right now. Yeah, so this is for Gen Con. It's another convention for gaming. But like part of that, what I felt in the nerd lifestyle is that we tend to obsess about our childhood. You know, like I still collect Star Wars toys when certain figures come out. You know, I hark back to like weird 80s movies that were never released to DVD. And because it's the thing that I didn't have it as a kid,
Yeah.
and now as an adult, I can control that. I can have it.
Yeah. I think it's Paul Rulov who talks about, he is a age play educator from the St. Louis community. He talks about this idea of the shrinking childhood, essentially, especially something we're seeing in this, you know, current climate of just like burnout culture and like growing up way too fast and introducing technology. I don't know about you guys. I'm so excited for Toy Story 5. They take on tech versus toys.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I
When
didn't
is
see
that
that.
coming out?
I
love
don't
Toy
know.
Story.
but you know, like our ability as adults to revisit that, whether it's, you know, on our own or even in our families, I think is something that everybody is looking for. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just. I love learning this because like misconceptions are melting away more and more and more, and I'm wondering how many other people might be listening to this being like, "Oh shit, that actually does sound good."
Yeah.
Like it's not what I thought it was, and hands down, that's one of my favorite things about this journey with this show is learning things that I thought were one way.
Absolutely.
And it is
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, now I got to tell you guys about the Chicago Age Play Convention. It's a
Okay.
space on its own. It's called CapCon.
Yes.
And it is local here to Chicago. It's a long one. So you have to be ready to put back like 4 days out of your week to do it. Although things are subject to change, but it is immersive. It's long for a reason. They want you to kind of have enough time to bookend leaving the adult world, getting into just a different space, and then, you know, coming back. And
Okay.
so the kind of stuff that I've seen in that space is just like really cool. They play with scale. So in their lobby,
No!
there's a sofa that you have to use a chair to get onto the sofa. So immediately while you're there, you are forced to kind of have the perspective of a smaller human, right? Like now you feel small because you climbed up on this sofa. They have like an oversized jungle gym where you go in and you feel this big while you're inside of it.
I'm not
'cause
going to
it's-
lie.
it's
That
made
sounds
to-
fucking amazing.
yeah. So, I mean, diaper, no diaper, just being in this space. I think the event also has done like kind of an emo rave where you can just go and kind of karaoke or
Yup.
sing in a
That's
group
it.
to
We're
like
done.
all kinds of stuff. And so
That is
it's a really cool
amazing.
space to be in, and you can move through all types of like internal feelings. So if you're feeling completely nonverbal, they take you down to like the most basic room where like, let's just play with squishy blocks and have lots of like color blocked offerings in this space. And then they have a room that's more middle, if you will, where you can just play like N64 and Mario Kart against your friends. And so
Yeah.
you just have to move through it and let your kind of internal system calibrate to wherever it's existing. And it's a really cool experience, I think, for anyone.
I mean,
You wanna go, right?
Yeah, hands down,
Yeah,
I want to go.
I kind of want to go too. Let's-
I didn't even get to talk about there's like a giant Nerf war that you pick a side, you can bring your own Nerf stuff or
my
not.
God.
And
No,
because
it-
you'll get lost. You'll never find it
Yeah,
again.
no.
That shit's expensive.
yeah,
that
yeah.
was the moment because I was like not sure about the I educated there and I was like, I don't know, age play for 4 days, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But right around the time that I was like, in the giant jungle gym and like watching the Nerf war. And I was like, I haven't felt like an adult in 2 days. And I was like, whoa, this is so healing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. You would get such a huge benefit out of it. I think I would too, but you especially, because he can't turn it off.
They do say that like age play oftentimes appeals to those who are like the most stressed out, like air traffic controllers, like check. Like, I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever watched the show The Boys.
Yeah.
Okay, so Homelander on The Boys, right?
Yeah.
As an adult nursing.
Yes!
Duh.
And
my
I think,
God, yes.
it's silly. It's The Boys. It's just a show. But at the same time, the comment that it was making is that it is those who hold the needs of others for so long that then find that they need to just put all needs down completely and have some chicken nuggets and macaroni and cheese and just not be anything for anybody or not be perceived by anybody. That's like the magic of the caregiving space from that bottom zone. And now that I'm saying that, in the same vein, it's a special person who can step in and stay in the caregiving role and say, I just want this for you and I'm not going to abuse or take that. And so when I do teach it, I also talk about parenting styles. How can our caregivers, our bigs, our daddy doms, do what they're doing well, right? They need to know what does that look like? Is it a permissive parenting style? Is it authoritarian? Is it authoritative? There's all different ways that we can kind of know ourselves a little better in that space too. So,
I have so much more to research.
I have so many questions. Oh my God.
But this screams to me like when like furries started becoming popular in news and pop culture, and people would make fun of them nonstop, and they think, well, all this is a sex convention where people dress up and have sex, and it's like, well, every furry I ever met, that's like the furthest thing from their mind. Like they literally just
they'd probably rather nerd out about what thought went into their fursuit and like what this character's name is and what persona it has. Yeah. And maybe there's some dark element of the furry stuff, but
there's dark elements to everything, right?
There's
There's
dark
a bell
elements
curve
to everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite thing to educate people on?
I'm quite passionate about taking like the newer folks and kind of giving them a framework of how to recognize, their own behavior and their own desire, like in the kink space, so that they're coming from an informed place, a place rooted in, safety, and that they can then go forth and explore and be like, I'm confident about why I want to exist in this space and what I'm looking for.
Wow.
So aside from the little space, what other
Marginalized kinks?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about furries a little bit, and the pets play space is quite adjacent, I think, to the little space. And some people will actually stop by sort of small space or little space on the way to like the nonverbal pet space.
Okay.
And a lot of times you'll see conventions actually sort of, maybe for better or for worse, clump these two things together and be like, pets and littles come mosh together. So I also talk about like pet play and the history of some of that, and
I would
what
love to
makes
hear
that
it.
interesting. So you've got your big ones with pet play, right? So there's the pony play, which I think is amazing, but also very expensive if you're going to get into it, because it's a lot of equipment, right? And you can certainly go into the pony headspace without a single piece of equipment, but I think there's an allure there to kind of want the things that are going to help you approximate like the pony lifestyle. And
What
there's
kind of equipment?
I wish I had my PowerPoint because I could show it, but like the pony hoods or like the things that put you up on the stirrup like feet where now you feel like you're clomping around. There are different types of ponies, right? There's like show ponies who want the whole outfit so that they can kind of show off and look fabulous, and then there's like working ponies too who are like carrying others, and so there's saddles involved with that, right? But so they're all kind of trying to approximate this sort of internal experience of something nonverbal, something very primal, something at the far end of the sort of dominance and submission bucket where like you literally have a handler and that person is leading you around.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have ever read The Sleeping Beauty. The Claiming of Sleeping Beauty by A.N. Rocklerow, which is really just a pen name for Anne Rice writing smut. And it
Oh.
was a trilogy. So it's 3 books where Anne Rice goes through this sort of claiming of Sleeping Beauty. And she's actually awakened by her prince as a sex slave. And there's quite a lot of pony play in that book.
Okay.
Oh, okay, so question before we dive into the rest of the well
I could do
here.
this all day.
Oh, I think you might be. So not only did you mention pony first,
Oh, I did.
which I'm guessing is a litany of other to come, but pony is probably the only play besides dog or puppy play that I've heard of.
Okay.
Why is that so popular?
Well, I mean, I know that pony play has a history to it. There was a full pony player exhibited in this Bizarre magazine, which is like 1920.
I used to buy and read those.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. Like,
what was it called?
Bizarre Magazine. Oh, my God. Yes. I feel like I discovered like a treasure whenever I found them like at a garage
I love that
sale
I'm
or a
mentioning it
estate
and you've
sale.
seen it before because
Yes.
that's really
Oh, my
cool.
God.
So there's a historical component to the puppy play, which I think, and the news media has like sensationalized it. I think there's an episode of Bones, or maybe an episode also of Criminal Minds, where like, you know, they get into the case and then it's some kind of puppy play, or even just like Anne Rice is a very well-known author, right? And so I think my sort of gravitas to want to mention it first is I think there is that kind of historical component as opposed to something like kitten play, which is quite a bit more new, at least for the American side of things. I know that like Japan has like idealized kitten
Yes.
girls forever, but for
Yes.
us over here on this, you know, side of the globe, I think it's quite new.
Okay.
So that would be the one that when I move through my material chronologically, I'm like ponies, then puppies, then we stop off at furries for a little bit.
Okay.
And then kitten. And then I kind of talk about how you don't need to be one of these big 3. You can have an animal persona and it could be whatever you want it to be. It could be a mouse, it could be a dragon, it could be a chimera, and you mashed them all up.
Is this what otherkin was? I heard a term otherkin years ago, and how it was described to me was, I am not defined by normal means of definition. I consider myself a dragon, but not in the way society would deem it.
Can you guys make that the punchline of the episode? Like just him saying, I consider myself a dragon.
Yeah, done. Just on loop, done.
I think what you hit on there is that like anything, when you move through approximations of play, it's different for everyone, but otherkin or Therian or some of these like
Right.
really spiritual beliefs that people are putting into the experience is going to be a mileage may vary situation. One person might be like, I just like this puppyhood. It's really cool. And another
Right.
person might be like, no, I'm embodying this part of my personality that I've given a name and a credence to. And it's really important to me on a spiritual level.
So that's what you mean by spiritual is that they
Like
put,
lore almost.
Yeah, they put their
Geek.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm at like the amount of time you take rolling into a D&D character, you know, that becomes you.
Yeah.
For a certain amount of time.
Wow,
Like you put
okay.
you put love and craft and care.
So if I can roll with that for a second,
Roll away.
with it.
Respect, by the way. Respect.
I talk about, and I've been talking more and more about this sort of idea of multiplicity within identity.
We've been wanting to talk about this.
Yeah, I
Okay,
want
cool.
more people talking about it. I feel like as we start to negotiate and we're striving to become more competent in the way that we talk about how to be safe, sane, and consensual and how to know one another, I can't think of a single dynamic that doesn't have some kind of caregiving in it. Like we are all daddy in some way, right?
Right.
And so I think it would be kind of a best practice, and I challenge all of us to start talking about these sort of facets of multiplicity and ask the person you're going to do pickup play with or the person that you're sort of getting into the dynamic with, like what kind of experiences do you have with your identity from a top perspective, and not just tops, but I'm just using it as an example. Do you have a top persona that's kind of like an alter ego for you? Like we all have these scene names, right? These chosen names we want to use in the kink world. And who is that? And how is that person different from who you are in the vanilla world when you're going to work every day, right? Let me get to know that person. Am I negotiating with that person or the person who are you showing up as? And then other facets would be like, do you experience regression? Have you ever experienced regression? What is that like for you? What does it mean? Does it mean you're feeling really safe? Does it mean that you're feeling really vulnerable? those kind of things. I think we should be talking about them more because I think everyone goes through it, whether you choose to call yourself an age player or a pet player or not.
Something that was brought up at a early point in our conversations, which I believe was with Saffron, I think we talked about it before the show actually, was that how many people have multiple identities, multiple personalities, not in the DID sense, but in the chosen sense. And then how normalized is that? Or like, because when we talk to people, it feels like so many people have like this one identity. But so many people also consider themselves switches. And wouldn't that also switch the persona, the character as well?
I feel like if you hang around kinksters long enough, everybody ends up at switch eventually.
Yeah.
We've only met one person that has never been a bottom, only a top. And I was like, oh, I thought everybody was a switch.
Yeah, we really did.
Yeah. Also, just to bring some of the clinical stuff into the room here, internal family systems, which is like a type of therapeutic practice, is kind of baked into the understanding that every human does show up differently across all of their experiences. And so when you're sort of in your work self or that self that has a lot of things that it has to kind of figure out for the day, sometimes that's referred to as like your manager persona. That's that person who's ready to maybe engage in some confrontation and be like, well, here are my facts, right? And then we have much more vulnerable parts of ourselves too, protectors or exiles that we can get to know and interact with. So from a therapeutic standpoint, I feel like kink is like life imitating, like art imitates life, right? And so we are people who are coming to this understanding because we want to know ourselves. That's the whole point of kind of electing to do the intellectual work of kink, and so it's not.
Whoa!
It's not. You just surprising. It's therapeutic.
You just dropped the bomb right there. Okay, say that again, and please explain what that means because I am.
By the way, I'm so happy that we talked about the neurodivergent conversation. I'm picking up so much information by this, and it's kind of like makes me happy that like you're missing it. Not that not that you're missing it, but that now you get to define it again for the other part of the audience that doesn't. Yep. So that's what I love. Yep. Thanks. Sorry.
So I think what you're touching on there, we talked before we started recording about this sort of double empathy problem, right?
Yes. Thank you.
Which in the neurodiverse world, it's kind of this understanding that when neurotypical folks and neurodivergent people come together, they're missing each other. But the stigma was that it was sort of all on the autistic or ADHD or neurodivergent person's side of it. That, oh, they're acting weird or they don't have as much empathetic understanding. They don't know how this interaction should work. But that's actually not the case. We're missing each other twice. Because when you put neurodiverse people with other neurodiverse people, they actually understand each other really well. It's only when you put these two groups together that they seem to be missing one another. And that goes back to what Judy Singer was saying about if you've met one mind, you've met one mind, right? Everyone is different. So,
yeah.
Just like meeting one kinkster is meeting one kinkster.
For sure.
And that's why Jason and I had, like I told you before, communication problems. So I was really confused why I couldn't understand him, because of his autism or my ADHD or my trauma issues or whatever. Because like I have an autistic son at home. I had an autistic husband at home. I was like, I know how to talk to autistic people. Of course. So it must be his fault. Yeah. But it's like we actually had to work really hard to understand each other. It's like the label doesn't mean anything, So thank you for bringing that up.
Full circle moment, right? That kink is a space that people come to hopefully ready to do the work. I mean, of course, people come for all different reasons, and maybe they saw a movie, then they want to approximate it. But for the most part, if they come and they stay, these are people who want to do the work. And if you do that work long enough, you end up a switch.
And what do you mean by doing the work? And why do you think that leads to being a switch?
Great question. Great. So nice of you to ask for clarification. I was hoping I would sound really cool. Now I have to break it down.
Okay, that's why I'm here.
Shit, that's going at the beginning of the episode because it sounded really cool.
Two-part question, right? And the first part was, what do you mean people come to stay and they want to do the work? I think in kink, there's a lot of flashy, showy things. Floggers look cool, crops look cool. Someone with a stuffed animal looks cool. But then you have to put time and intention and attention to the thing you want to learn about, especially if you want the people in the community to take you seriously or to want to learn from you or to call you a mentor. And I always say to people in my 101 classes, educators should be judged. They should be judged, hard. They should not be assumed to have power just because they're getting up and telling you something.
Oh,
that's beautiful.
We're all sort of trying to hone these crafts of things that, called to us, in some way.
Yeah.
And then the second part of your question was, what do you mean when you say that they end up as a switch? And I think that when you know oneself deep enough that you can ask for the things that you want to experience, which in American culture is so hard, right? To just ask for the thing that you want and not approximate the experience you saw somewhere else, but really get vulnerable, that's kind of a switch space because it's vulnerable and intimate and you're asking for care. Whether that's being beaten or literally cared for, what have you.
Why is it so hard to ask for what you want?
Well, I mean, I might reach for the fact that in this country, there's no standardized sex education. It's a no man's land out there.
And it's demonized left and right.
Yeah, in some places, they're still teaching that masturbating would make hair grow on your palms,
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. I think it's because we start in the Wild West. And it's whatever you see that you eroticized first is your starting point. And that can be so different from anybody else existing. And so I think we fight to kind of come back to community and normalize it for ourselves, affirm it for ourselves that we're not weird, that we're just enjoying what we like.
Do you feel like
Heaven forbid.
yeah. Do you feel like this current generation is having an easier time with that because it seems like they're more outspoken about because I have my other son who doesn't have autism. He has several friends who are furries and I filmed an unboxing for them and I know about the fursona and all that and I'm our generation would never be that open about it.
Some of my closest friends,
Yeah.
I would put money on the fact that they have not watched the show, either because they don't want to hear about it, or because it's just so far out of their wheelhouse that they still think it's
I feel like you guys did
obscene.
just answer your own question, right? If you can be doing unboxing videos with the younger generation and your friends of the similar generation wouldn't even turn this on, the answer's baked in there somewhere. But I think really maybe what we're searching for is the why and technology and its evolution and what the younger generation is just growing up with this companion next to them, this computer that they learn to ask questions to or, find information from. It's just something that the older generations didn't have, right? They had to do it in the dark and they were terrified of it. Actually, what we would consider the father of human sexuality, Alfred Kinsey, who there's a banging movie with Liam Neeson if you want to watch the biopic.
What's it called?
I think it's just called Kinsey, actually.
Was it Liam Neeson? I thought it was I thought it was someone else.
I'm pretty sure it's Liam Neeson.
Yeah, she just
Damn,
Trust my hyperfixation.
tossed her purple hair.
my
and
bad.
So, yeah.
I've seen it too. That's where cornflakes came from.
Yes,
was
and
to
Kellogg's.
keep you from masturbating.
Well, not
Yes.
from the movie.
Oh, no,
but
yes, yes.
you got to be careful with the young generation. A lot of people don't know
fair,
what is
fair.
real. That's, maybe their learning curve. But absolutely, Kinsey was a biology teacher who then tried to meet a need because his marriage to his wife, their bodies just didn't work well together. And he was like, I don't think we're alone. And he was left reading encyclopedia what people, it was one message about sex. And so if you juxtapose that with what our new generation is learning, it's, I think, a lot more affirming. Or we were just talking, I think, about a stand-up comedian who was talking about sort of poking fun at furries, adult babies, things like this, that there used to be an element of shame that doesn't exist anymore. It was oh, you should go do that in your basement. But if you can find thousands of people to do it alongside you, now we're having a good time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't think I grew up in nerd culture. I grew up going to anime conventions and comic book conventions, and in that age, I never felt more connected to anyone in my life because I never felt really connected with a lot of my friends. And then when I went to kinky college, I got that feeling again, and I probably hadn't had that in over 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because we are pretty vanilla. We went in as vanilla.
Not anymore, yeah.
Well,
Right.
We're learning a lot. I'm discovering some kinks. I just have to say. Anyway.
I'm writing notes in my own book.
Yeah.
What I want to do.
Yeah,
It's a whole
but it
other
was.
topic.
I'm still like blown away how welcoming and willing to
Yes.
educate everyone is, and I was never made to feel like I had a dumb question, even when it was a dumb question. Yeah, so
That's wonderful
I really
to hear.
appreciate that. Yeah.
My journey definitely was similar in steps because I know we were talking about like I literally Googled like college and kink and there it came. But after like the glow and the con drop had worn off, I was like, well, I want to keep doing this, and I want to do it and learn. And so I was really intentional about looking at different clubs in Chicago, and I found one that to me had a lot of values and a lot of diversity. And I think I don't want my kink to just look like one note. I want it to have a lot of DEI in it. I want it diverse. I want it inclusive. I want equity in that space. And so I had to kind of look for a while to find something that I was like, oh, this is a space that is ringing true on all of that. And
Interesting.
it wasn't perfect. It's still not a perfect space, but I've stayed in sort of my home dungeon as long as I have because I would like to make it better, right? I think you found a community that the best of us want to give back to make better experiences for those who are coming after us.
I mean, tell me that's not like one of the best reasons for life in general. Was like you found something you love, you want to share that with others and make it better for them.
Yeah.
God, that's like every teacher, like a good teacher. That's every good teacher's dream who didn't like fall into the position, but actually like sought for it.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a good sort of transitional point, but also like shamefully wanting to just nerd out about like where academia and kink is sort of coming to in this current moment is I think it's wonderful that we have lay people who've been in kink forever that are like, let me get up and show you what I know about flogging or impact. And that is amazing. But I think also we want to constantly push the bar. And I think probably through some of your guys' interviews, you've noticed there's like just no standardization for like, what is a
Correct.
kink education?
Do you think
how
there
does
should
one
be?
move? Well, I'm part of this group called the Kink Professional Standard Alliance, or KIPSA, and they're working on that very problem. They're trying to close the gap of like, if you want to take yourself seriously, if you want to put time and attention into this, we want to teach you. And so it's KIPSA has a lot of different programs. One of them is the CPKP program, which would take just a lay person and get them through like 9 modules of self-paced, cultural, competent kink education. Everything from branding, not branding like but branding like how do you make
Brand
your brand?
yourself.
Oh,
Okay.
that's interesting. No,
Yeah,
we,
because
we,
we
we've talked about
might
the other
also
branding.
have branding.
Yes.
I don't know. I only teach module 5.
Which is so funny because our other business has
deal
to do
with marketing
branding.
and branding.
Yes.
So,
But yeah, so it's 9 self-paced modules that would take you from knowing how to market yourself and knowing how to like be consent conscious, understanding, power dynamics. There's all this different material that you move through, and then it goes into some master tracks, and people can look up this stuff
Yeah.
on their own, but KIPSA would be the place to start.
And then do you hope that it'll become standardized where one day, like you'll say, KIPSA certified educator or something like, or
I would
some
love
letters
to
by
make
yeah.
that the standard, that there's some kind of,
Because everyone, like you said, if you've been to a few dungeons and you know a few things, like you could consider yourself an educator, but you might not be. You might actually be steering people the wrong way.
Yeah.
So it is very smart from the person who is trying to learn to look into who your educator is and see what kind of reputation they have. How would somebody do that?
How would someone like vet or find a
Yes,
mentor?
yes.
I can tell you how people do it now, right?
okay, fair.
Education. Like if you are in a space, the way that I always teach my baby kinksters, like to know that they're in a competent space, is this should be a consent and an education forward space. Look around. Is there signage? Are people giving you like places? Does it have like a night dedicated to education? Like what kind of intention has been put into kind of a standardization? Because even at a munch, there should be some kind of material either online about the munch that forwards education, or sometimes it's like a pamphlet that they have on the tables or being passed out. And there's just really no excuse these days to not give attention to that, especially if you're kind of an event coordinator that's doing the same thing every time. You can reuse those things. So
or even just a QR code to be
Yeah.
like, here, read this.
So I
on
would
your-"
say look for the signaling. How has the space shown you that it wants to be an educationally conscious space? And, then a second sort of part of that is like, what sort of open door conversation does this space have in terms of if you had a bad experience? Do they want to know about that, or are they like, let's bury that under the rug, we're not answering your email?
Yeah.
Because having an open door or having some kind of just avenue for you to say, I want feedback and I'm a feedback slut, like those are the best spaces that want to innovate and change. At KIPSA, we say like, we are feedback sluts. We want to change. We want to innovate. We want to know if we're doing a good job.
You want to evolve.
Yeah.
Love that so much.
So those are just like two things that come to mind when you say it.
God, like that's strong.
Yeah.
Those are really
That's
strong.
really good advice. Yeah. Because I know that we've been to a few dungeons and you walk into one and you feel a certain way and you think it's like the color of the walls or something. And then you go into another one and it's like you get a completely different vibe. But it's like what you're saying is that if everything else is, like the educators are, like on board with, having everything out and the signage and, making you feel safe, so don't just judge it by the aesthetic, judge it by other things.
Or
Okay,
at the bare minimum should be purple walls, red walls, no walls. Like there should be some kind of education for our newcomers that like helps them to orient themselves to safety and to like self-awareness.
Yeah, because the one thing that really just still like bugs me to this day is that those dungeon doors are open to the public on day X. I'm like, that is not safe.
Well-
and also they didn't get the tour.
There it is.
Yeah,
There it
they
is.
didn't get like the tour and how to behave. So somebody
Right.
actually walked off the street and wanted to jump in a scene with somebody else because they didn't know that that's not something you do. They thought it was a freaky free for all. I'm going to, jump in and get my rocks off.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's not cool.
We have to have a way to protect, when lay people who don't know what they're doing enter the space, or even within like the first foray of that lay person who did walk in and they're like, this place is awesome. I want to stretch my legs in here. How do we educate that person? Because they deserve it too, to
course.
know
Absolutely.
about the space that they just kind of decided to get freaky in.
Absolutely. And I think that would be the dungeon's responsibility if you are letting them in. They should you're checking IDs because you have to. Well, then you make them sit down and you make them read this and sign or whatever. At least like a minimum, there should be that.
Or someone can make a movie, a quick video.
Do we know anyone who makes videos, Jason?
But yeah, like our experiences have been very positive in that realm. We've had personal guided tours.
And that's what it is.
each
We've had a
time.
lot of great mentors showing us around.
Well, I think that speaks to the fact that you don't have to work very hard for this community to want to like take you under its wing.
that is so true.
Yes. Yeah,
So
we
true.
found that. But we've also found the people who do show up on those open nights and they just look lost.
Yeah.
And
Scared.
I don't know nearly enough, especially about the location, right? But like, I wish I could just be like, guys, come here.
Yeah.
But we've been to enough munches where like the good coordinators will go, oh, they're new. Okay, you go sit by them because I know you're into this and they have a shirt that says.
So you
X on
see
it.
the people, I mean, that kind of just landed me back on this topic of like, we're saying built for the community by the community, right?
Oh, yeah.
I can't think of a dungeon or a convention space in this city that isn't volunteer run. So this is all people pouring their love and attention back into the space for some reason. So it's great to hear that like in the best spaces, you see folks curating and taking that sort of role on their shoulders to be like, let me take this newcomer.
That's a really good point because there isn't a lot of places that people volunteer so much, like a lot of time.
really.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, that also speaks to this point of like when you get to that sort of development in your sort of growth or journey of giving back. I know so many people who feel like they can't exist as players in their home spaces anymore because they've
Right.
got to the point of community leading where it doesn't feel right anymore to kind of be seen in that space for those vulnerable parts. And so, the next thing should probably be like burnout care for our community leaders.
I mean,
'Cause
that's a
they're working
super
hard.
valid point.
Yeah.
If you're helping so many people,
Yeah.
where do you turn for help?
Yeah. I don't have an answer for that one yet, but I do think that KIPSA and the Standards Alliance, and I want to just give like a big shout out to the person whose brainchild it was. Her name is Docu Rock, or Dr. Yolinda Rahman. That there are people out there who are kinksters and have the academia sort of knowledge and are just trying to do some of that heavy lifting to take it off of some of us who have been here a long time.
Is it okay if we put some links down below to the
I think
people you mentioned?
that would be amazing, because I love what the project is doing. And they're also trying to kind of create this avenue of like therapeutic work for people who are processing trauma or processing other things. And so that sort of division of the work is called therapeutic BDSM. And I think we also oftentimes in kink say, it's therapeutic, but it's not therapy. But what happens when you need it to be therapy?
Yes.
Like, where do you go?
Yeah.
And I think that the Therapeutic BDSM Network is trying to answer that question in a really structured way that could say, you found something in the kink space and you want to work through it, but maybe doing it with Steve, the Dom from the local dungeon, isn't the best place. So let's take some more time and care with it.
So do you feel like that is something realistic that's going to happen?
Yeah, so it is happening.
Okay.
It's in its early stages of evolution. I think Doc is on cohort 3. So there are, a handful of people nationwide who have got the certification. I am one of them, which, I just high praise to Doc, because I'm really behind the mission of what she's doing.
Amazing.
But what the model does is it takes a clinician and it takes like an educated practitioner who's been well vetted and understands the craft. And then it takes the client. And so they make this triangle, and the therapist is there to sort of understand the client and sort of start to build what this profile of creating a therapeutic experience using BDSM as the somatic intervention could look like. And then the practitioner is delivering on that dream. So
I thought the person doing the BDSM part was also like the therapist, but this makes me feel a whole lot. Sorry, that's mine. Yeah.
Okay. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, who's calling me right now?
But that actually makes me feel a lot better that there's a third person to make sure that everything's
Yeah.
Yeah, the model has worked hard on professional distance and like the ethical qualities, which I think that's why we come to that phrase of like it's therapeutic, not therapy, is because you can't sort of heal in the same place that you're eating, right? Like you need someone who is not also getting something out of the experience. The best therapy is like one who is not self-disclosing all about what their needs are. Your therapist is supposed to be listening to you.
right.
And so it kind of brings us back to that framework.
I will admit though, and this is a totally selfish thing, and I apologize about that. My therapist, I feel like I couldn't trust her until I learned about her, and like because she is into certain things and is not into certain things, and I'm like, okay, you're a human. I can talk to you.
Okay. Full circle again, back to the neurodivergent quality. Did you know that a lot of neurodivergent people sort of relate to a story with a story of their own? This is the way that they move through.
Well, let me tell you a story about that.
Exactly. And so it makes sense that a lot of us do need that sort of therapeutic alliance that's built around genuine connection. The goal is, as a therapist, knowing how to do self-disclosure or disclosure in general that isn't making the things that they shared with you in any way, shape, or form your problem to hold. And great disclosure, talks about the movies that are out there, talks about, just things that aren't making it a cost on the client's side.
Absolutely.
And that's forever just kind of a person to person thing.
That's a super good point.
It
Holy
is a
shit.
super good point. Yeah. And the
That's what we
therapist
go to school for.
the therapist I was telling you about, that's why I miss her so much, because I really felt like I felt listened to. And she also gave me like a little pieces of her life here and there, but it was very, it was very neutral in a way, like I know she has a grandma, and then I know that her grandma passed away, but she shared that with me because she's like, I'm not feeling at 100% today. If you want to reschedule, let me know. But just so you know, I'm coming in with some grief. I can still do my job, but I just want to give you the heads up. And I felt so like
She showed up authentically in that
Thank
moment.
you. That was
Yeah.
it. Yes,
That
and I'm
makes
like,
all the
and
difference.
and that was the first like, oh, she is a real human being moment for me with her.
I feel that when you do that to me too, like when we get together to do like work days, you come in, you're like, look, I had a shit night of sleep last night. I feel like garbage. I'm like, oh, well, okay. I don't have to be on my game the whole time either.
Yeah. I usually do that in case I snap at you. You know
well,
why?
And same way. Yeah.
Well, for kinksters too, a lot of times, you come to a therapist with a specific reason. Maybe it's work stress that is just gotten to a boiling point, or maybe it's something in your marriage, but you don't always show up and then mention like, oh, I like this in the bedroom. And so many of us find ourselves in these relationships that have gone on years with our therapist, and we haven't divulged like the things that we like, that we maybe want to work on.
Absolutely.
And so I would also just tell people that are out there, like, you can find a kink competent therapist. They exist. There are places that people can go and look for them. The two that sort of come to mind is at least some states that are part of the Kink Aware Professional Directory, or I think it's called CAP something, Kink Aware Professionals. These are people who are willing to list on there, yes, I have kink experience and I'm knowledgeable, or I have lived it, or, varying degrees. And then the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, the NCSF, they also have a Kink Aware directory of professionals. And through their directory, you can find not only therapists, but you can find like someone to come in and like do construction work on your home if you have one of those beds that have the cages underneath and you don't want someone to freak out.
Yeah.
Or judge you, or
Yeah.
to hold ransom for you, do all the other horrible shit that.
Or if you're looking for a photographer
Well, right.
or a video person.
Oh,
I'm just
yeah.
saying, yeah.
All kinds of services.
We should definitely
We should
look
be
into
doing
that. Yeah.
Speaking of telling stories, along my own journey, I found that most of the kinks that I've been introduced to really don't interest me that much until I learned about fear play. And this sparked something in my mind, not something new, but something really old that I've been pushing away and putting into storage and putting into a box that's like, look, something is wrong with you for thinking this way. So I want to know, one, what's wrong with me for thinking this way? But like, how often does that fall into your line of work where like, do people ask like, what's wrong with me for liking this?
Oh gosh, my line of work, and my mind immediately went to like as a therapist, or my mind like as an educator, because I get the question both from my everyday clients, right? Everyone says, what's wrong with me? And I get it from new kinksters in the kink world, like, why am I here? I think everyone carries shame in some degree, and the relationship is varying depending on where we are in our journey. But since you asked a therapist, what's wrong with me? I will give you the therapist answer, which is, from a clinical standpoint, the way that diagnostic criteria essentially is reviewed and met, we kind of call it like the 4, sometimes 5 Ds of diagnosis, right? And in no certain order, trying to recall them off the top of my head: duration, deviance, danger, dysfunction. These are all different criteria. And so we want to know, how long is the behavior that you're concerned about falling into those different categories, right? If it's deviant, how far deviant? Like, do you not enjoy any vanilla experiences? The duration, like, do you need to do this every single day of your life, multiple times a day? Is it dangerous for you? Does it disrupt the things that you need to get done every day? Because if a behavior is not falling into that criteria, for the most part, we would say you're perfectly fine. You're engaging in something that's not hurting you, not hurting other people.
If it's consensual.
Yeah. And the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, this lobby group, right? I think a couple episode interviewees before me have said, like, they've done a lot of work to sort of demystify, even for the psychological community, what kink is. Because before it was this, understanding that you can't consent to battery, right? All kink is illegal. All BDSM is illegal. But
Isn't it still?
I think it still is, but this lobby group is sort of stepping in to say, well, hold on a second, because this isn't clinically relevant. And there have been things in the diagnostic statistical manual, the DSM, which is the book that therapists use to make a diagnosis.
DSM-4?
We're on the 5TR now.
There we are. Okay.
But the lobby group stepped in to say, we need these declassified. Like the stuff that's in here, these fetishes, I mean, even right down to like gender was in the book at one point, right? So it's an ongoing conversation, and the work is always to kind of make the conversation standardized in a way that's helping the most marginalized groups, right? We're talking about marginalized kink, but to come full circle kind of on what you're mentioning, everybody has their own niche, right? But yet, even within kink, we oftentimes find echo chambers of like people in groups that look a certain way or act a certain way. And so I think constantly trying to make it a world that is for everybody, whether you're, fat or a person of color or, disabled, like kink is for everyone. So how do we make that work? Yeah. Did that answer your question?
No.
Oh, did you want to just talk about fear play?
No. Yeah, I was like, tell me why I feel this way. No, let me lay down on a couch. No, I'm
the
kidding. Sorry.
interesting thing with him, because he comes from making movies, he teaches movie making and things like that. So he wanted to make scary movies.
Yeah.
So the fact that can you help us understand? Okay, help me understand. So what would be the difference between fear play for Jason, or feel free to chime in if you know, or like just making scary movies? Like, how does it become a kink?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, so it's doing something for you, right? It's serving a
Yeah.
purpose. It sounds like what you were suggesting is that it's getting things in your body to like turn on in a way that maybe
Yes.
it doesn't feel that way. And I mean, we talked about the lack of standardized sex education. We talked about like American culture and things like that, but also like the porn industry, or just like being an American now is sometimes just like so gluttonous in nature that we don't feel anything anymore. And so it's not surprising to me that fear play lets you live on the edge because it makes you feel something. So maybe there's catharsis happening in that space.
And that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's literally like I'm getting to get out of my skin, be in another skin, and then get out of it and go, okay,
Yeah.
I had that moment. I can go back.
Yeah, like you switch your brain off and go to a
Yes.
different place.
And to me, it's zero sexuality. It's
It doesn't.
I know
It's a kink that
everything's-
doesn't even need a sexual gratification.
Correct. There is no sexual gratification.
Yeah.
I know everything is sexuality, but it is no sexual gratification.
Yeah. Because you went on a journey that was cathartic even without that. Now you're getting kinky.
Well, shit.
I don't think you're a baby kinkster anymore.
Oh, well, I haven't done it yet, though. That's the issue.
Valid. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you need some scene work classes, maybe someone to tell
Yeah.
you like how do you build a scene that has fear as the component. There are people out there who definitely do that work.
So his problem is that he has ideas, but his ideas are so grandiose.
They're big.
That they're like, he told me one of his ideas. I'm like, you need to film that because it's a fucking movie.
Yeah.
No joke. Yeah. So maybe take it down.
Make
a
it
notch.
happen.
Yeah.
I don't know. My whole life. Show's not about me.
I know, but like he can't do anything on a small scale. It's all like,
I wonder if that's at the end of the day what kink really is just everybody finding sort of their way to make the fantastic more tangible and touchable. Because everyone's virgin or thing that they're into. We kind of talked earlier, right, about like whatever erotic thing is what you saw first in your experience of sex kicked you off into developing a sexual identity.
Right.
And so maybe the best kinks are the ones that take that idealized version and bring it closer to being the thing that you get to play with.
without having to be the big.
Show's over.
Yeah, that's
that
it.
was
Yeah.
that was fucking. No, I'm kidding.
But I love that. So you can still get the satisfaction of it in a kink scene without like going all. You just haven't tried it. Maybe
yeah.
that'll
So those
that'll
like
be satisfying.
3 key ingredients that we talked about as it pertained to age play, but maybe it's every single kink that people find nostalgia, people find catharsis, and people find an intimacy with their partner that is just so unique to what they're trying to build. And this is the sort of framework of stepping beyond the vanilla, if you will.
Okay. I'm not sure if this is going to be a kink answer or a therapy answer or a combination of both. What is the one thing, if there is the one thing, that is a very, it's a commonality in pretty much all kinksters? Like, have you found anything that's like everybody?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
I really need to think about that so long that you might have to pause it.
Because
Yeah.
him and I talk about this a lot for obvious reasons, because the show and everything else. We sort of suspect that a lot of kink comes from trauma. What do you think about that?
I think that everyone has trauma. I think I would say that kink comes from self-awareness of one's trauma.
Oh.
Because I think there's plenty of vanilla people out there with loads of trauma, but it's the decision to become self-aware of that trauma and start to do some work internally that makes the conversation something more.
That you're writing that down, right? Because that is some gold right there.
I mean, that's like, oh my God. So like, okay, if anyone at home listened to that sentence pretty much, and fucking rewind that, let that sink in for a second. Thank you. Oh my God. The self-awareness of the kink, because I think that's what therapy is to begin with, is naming something, putting a name to it, putting the foundations of how, well, now I know what it is. Now I can put the work into it.
Yeah.
That's what fucking kink is.
There's a
Holy
really
shit.
beautiful sentence about trauma when we as clinicians kind of approximate like what trauma is, because trauma is not what happens to you, the person. It's not the thing, right? It's not the event, but it's what happened to your internal system as it tried to cope with the event.
I just heard about this and I found it fascinating.
Yeah.
I was listening to that on the way here this morning. It was talking about childhood issues and stuff like that. And the therapist said exactly that. And she said, if you went through trauma and you had a solid foundation of parents or people in your life that help you process that acknowledge that, yes, that was really difficult. Let me help you through this versus, like poo-pooing you and saying like, oh, your feelings don't matter and whatever. So either you process the trauma because somebody helps you with it, or you internalize it and you don't process it and it comes up 30, 40 years later and you're in therapy, like, figuring out why you want to be burnt with sticks, So,
Well, kink-wise too, I think there's much like sort of what you're saying, there's an element of healing from trauma where in the work that I've done, I've seen that trauma needs to be felt, it needs to be understood, it needs to be held, sometimes by a community or multiple people. And we've talked extensively about how, at least in shared kink spaces, we are there as a community holding one another, even if it's just in the energy of saying, you belong in this space doing your thing alongside my thing, and it's all going to be valid tonight. So maybe it is in some ways therapeutic. It's not therapy, but kink is therapeutic.
that is fascinating because I have never thought of it like that, because I always thought that kinksters were just exhibitionists, and that's why they wanted to be together in a dungeon to like show off their toys and all the fun things they're doing. But that makes so much more sense.
I mean, we can still go back and compete on who has the coolest light up toy in the dungeon. Like,
Obviously.
valid.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I saw a hair flip there.
But that'll only
There's a
last so
story.
long.
Yeah.
You know, but it seems like people in the community, they keep going back, and because they get something more than what they're actually getting that day, you know, whether it's, you know.
We were talking another conversation another time about like one of the things that you found with most men or even cis, you know, straight men is acceptance, is just the need to be accepted instead of like, you know, saying like you're held to a certain standard, like you as yourself are accepted.
Yep, correct.
And I've never met anyone who doesn't want that.
Acceptance. You
Yes.
mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just who you are.
Yeah.
You're fucking perfect the way you are.
And I think it's interesting. I heard shades of what you said. Let me make sure I understood it to its fullest. But
such a
because
good
you were talking
communicator.
about like the cis white male experience, right? And earlier you were talking about essentially communities that are cushioned and helped trauma like not feel so impactful. And it's just an intersection where straight white men, cis het white men have had a lot of cushioning because they come with it baked in more. Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that.
Well,
but-
and I also think, there, God, I don't want to get down this path of another thing, but like there's a reason serial killers are, the certain gender and a certain mindset. And that goes back to the whole, like, there's not enough touching, not enough,
not being
acceptance,
accepted,
not
yeah.
enough. And anyway, I know
Yeah.
that's a whole other topic, but
You said something about consent fatigue. Can you say what that is?
Yeah. So the easiest way for me to liken it is like if you've ever taken a survey, any kind of survey, and it's just droning on, and you find that your answers are starting to kind of lean more towards like the neutral middle because you're just exhausted of trying to continue to check in with self to be
Yes.
like, what is my experience?
Yes.
That's the same thing that can happen in negotiation, that we've gone on so long that we're kind of losing the plot on whether or not it's really meeting that need. And so in kink, we kind of say like, it's okay to leave it for next time. Like just build a second scene with that later. If you've done a lot of work, that's enough for now.
Because do you think, like, you feel like people new into the scene, they get so excited, they want to do everything
all at once.
Are you guys familiar with this frenzy, the term frenzy?
We heard it.
We've heard
yeah.
it quite a
But please
bit.
talk
Yeah,
about
so
it.
frenzy, right, is like, okay, so you made it to the space, you did something that was really fun. A lot of us talk about the different tapas or try me stations. Those can be really intoxicating for your brain
Yeah.
because it feels really cool to be doing something new. But if you are exposed to something new and it feels really great, sometimes that can sort of become addicting. Oh, I want that dopamine rush again. I'm going to go to the dungeon again this week. I'm going to get into something. And so frenzy is when you're doing that and it's starting to kind of get into those diagnostic areas that are more peaked, right? Oh, my duration in this play is now a lot longer than I might have intended, or I'm kind of maybe doing things that might be a little dangerous for me. So when you lose sight of what your needs are because you just want to get that dopamine burst, that's when we're not being safe.
Gotcha.
There's something I really want to touch on that you touched on earlier was the idea that technology is allowing people to understand things at a younger age and not only understand it, but like accept it and feel accepted.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that this is a positive momentum in the younger generation, like Gen Z? Are they coming into the lifestyle more educated, more aware?
I definitely think they're coming in more well-read. I don't know if I have the answer for
okay.
that, but I think that the internet and the advent of like finding things out there, like, does mean that before maybe a younger person might step into the space, that they've created some predispositions on what they Googled and what they found. But there is, I think, also a disconnect between what's out there and like what is the reality of the doing of it. And I think that's, their maybe struggle is to bridge that gap. That's for them. Whereas like for the older generation, they were just carving it out of nothing. Now the younger generation is like, oh, I have all this information. What's true? What's real?
So how do they figure that out?
Oh, that's the thing, right?
Yeah, right.
I think
right.
it's a moderation of everything, like a well-rounded moderation of reading about something and asking someone about something and going and having top-down lecture style information and to dabble in all of those areas kind of creates you as a well-rounded human. Too much of any one thing is not good, right? If we just went to all munches, but we didn't have any educational material, we would hear a lot of, other people's opinions about things, but maybe nothing too standardized or deeper. If we did all education, but we never talked to another human being about the actual doing of it, there's something that we're losing. So it's in the variety of all of the learning that's out there, I think.
I got a question about this. The younger generation comes in read, and you said you're not sure if they're well read.
Oh, yeah.
And from my own edification and my own experience with the younger generation, patience is not a high virtue that I have noticed. This is my experience. Typically, the answer to a question is wanted now. And I think that's why, like if you Google something now, the AI will tell you immediately, well, here's the answer. It's like, well, calm down. I need to discern this for myself, but that's also my mindset. Are you finding that, when a younger generation gets into the kink lifestyle, they want the answer right now. Like,
or they want an answer that meets the expectation that they formulated in their mind before coming into the space. And as you guys have, I think, seen a little bit of, the space is kind of whatever it's been built to be. It's not going to be whatever the internet might have created or these sensationalized media portrayals might have led you to believe. We're just now really still coming full circle moment with our kink spaces. And so I think that sometimes the younger generation sees what's available and they think they're going to see something in the real here and now that's just as fantastic. And it's not. It's just real.
I know I was super disappointed when I went to my first dungeon and Christian Grey wasn't there waiting for me with his $1 million and his helicopter. I was devastated. I'm just saying.
What do you mean every dungeon doesn't look like the sex room show from the Netflix thing?
Exactly.
Oh, because it's just community members making the best of what they can with the space that they have.
And they don't have $1 million to throw into their dungeon.
Yeah.
But even then, I from the people that we've met, and we've been blessed with fantastic people. Holy shit.
Yep.
But I don't think they would want that. Like the thing that I've gathered the most is the community and the work we're working through, like you're saying, working through stuff individually. And that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And that can be done here.
Yeah.
I think that from the limited amount of time I spend with the younger generation, that what they do want, though, is that standardization that we were talking about earlier. I think that, again, it can be an aesthetic conversation of if you prefer blue or purple or, red walls, but in each one of these rooms that there should be a baseline of this is a safe space,
I actually respect that part, feeling safe in an environment that you're unaware of, unfamiliar with.
100%. Yeah. So how do you address that when you're educating people?
How do we address
their expectations versus reality? I
mean, the first thing that came to mind, whether this might not be the best answer, it could just be the first thing that came to my mind, is that the space is not going to be for everyone, right? And that if you come and you just are really turned off by the space, maybe it's not for you. And there's a battery of different offerings in Chicago, from the west side to the north side to convention life. And I think it's maybe just about finding what is for you. So I would almost say it's okay to say this space isn't my space. And maybe there is another space out there. Maybe I need to make the space. And I do see a lot of people in the new generation that are willing to say, I'm going to make it. I'm really into this thing. So we're going to have a puzzle making munch now, or we're going to have, whatever it might look like. And that's so valid. If you don't see it, make it. Absolutely. That the community's been all about that since the beginning. Right?
I'm sorry. I'm just in awe. That makes me so happy that people are finding their niches. And even if that niche isn't what is available, fuck it, I'm gonna make it myself.
Are you guys familiar with this term or initialism? It says TNG before certain FetLife events. If you ever see
I've seen that. I have no idea what it is.
That stands for the next generation. And basically, it would mean if you see something labeled like TNG on that particular munch, that people under 35 are invited. But if you're over, I think it's 35, it could be a different cutoff. It's we're saying this may be not for you.
Okay. My dumbass was like, oh, cool, Picard. Yeah, awesome.
Of course.
I'm in.
Yep, that was my first thought when she said the next generation.
Because we've talked a lot about neurodiversity, and we talked about the way that neurodivergent people relate to one another, and it's no surprise that the kink space lends itself to neurodivergent folks, because it offers clear communication and negotiation. It offers sensory regulation and ways to kind of get the things that you need around what you like. But I think that the danger of that is that a lot of times it speaks to other things, right? So many neurodivergent folks that I know, assume that their level of empathy is the same in other people, or that because they're, a certain sort of moral compass exists, that it's going to exist in others. And so if I could say like one thing to the community, I would just want them to go slowly and really build a solid foundation, and not assume that because someone is on a platform or has an educational lens, that that's not a person that they can, critique or ask questions from. We need to pull our educators off the pedestal and talk to them as if they're real people, and really kind of have that same lens of vetting and things like that when we are in community space.
I think that's a beautiful issue to bring up, and thank you for saying it. As a neurodivergent person, that's kind of how I feel. Like, I've met one other person in the kink community, and they're kind of like me. So now everyone is like me, and I can just go up and no, of course that's not the case.
Or you can hold two truths. Everybody can be like you, but maybe their brain also works a little differently, and that just because someone is like you doesn't mean that it doesn't need the same amount of work negotiating and getting to know their patterns and their readiness for whatever the play is that you're going to do. It's not just because someone is like you is not a substitute for doing the work, right?
Can I just hang out with you like all day?
You can come to all my classes.
Oh my God.
We just might.
Without a doubt.
Oh my God.
So I exist in the Midwest kink community, and on FetLife, I am AliceIsMissing. You can see where my next speaking engagement is going to be on that platform.
Okay.
But yeah, I work hard to keep my even my sort of sex educator professional life different from my therapeutic life. So you won't ever see me engaging in kink in a place where I've touched it from an educational standpoint. So I want to demystify the therapeutic world a little bit and give people some of these tools. And
I love that.
Yeah, that's, I think, that space between I will sex educate and do the therapy work.
And that's one of the reasons why this show exists. Because like I am always fascinated, like why is this a certain way? Like why do people find this sexy? Why is this? And Jason's like, well, let's just start a podcast and ask people. I'm like, okay.
It's so brilliant that you guys are sort of growing with the podcast and knowing with the podcast. And I think it's got real potential to kind of, you didn't know what you knew until you knew it, So there's a real innocence to the sort of foray of how you're building it that I think viewers see that and they want to step into that space.
And I think that's part of it. We didn't mean for it to be like that, but
we didn't
because initially we can't be the only one that's not educated that wants to enter this space, whether on a professional level or a personal level. So I'm like, I don't care. I'll be the dummy that asks all the questions because I know I'm not alone. Yeah. So
I love that motto. That's a personal value of yours that I think you're not afraid to ask the question because it's not just an answer for you. It's an answer for your audience too. And that's
who's afraid to ask.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have such an eloquent way of putting things that it really just... And first I thought it was like the fancy language, like the whole therapy
you
language.
You said that at the beginning too.
Yeah, I'm like, these are some big words. But it's the way you make me feel when you say it, like very reassuring and comforting. So I want to listen and learn more. So you are definitely in the right job. And thank you for educating us.
Oh, thank you guys for coming and bringing questions and really being curious. And I've seen the other episodes. I'm so excited for what this journey is gonna come to for you guys. And I said earlier, right? I think you'll be a year from now watching your early episodes and being like, wow, I can't believe how far we've come. So I'm really thrilled that I got to be part of that. And I hope that you have more people in the chair that are bringing good information that, grows your journey.
Thank
Us
you.
Too.
Yes.
but thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's a wrap.
If this episode cracked something open for you, confused you, turned the light on, or made you rethink some old assumptions, that's the point.
Sex, kink, and desires are never one size fits all. They're personal, they're evolving, and they deserve way more respect than the stereotypes give them.
We're not here to tell you what to want. We're here to champion everyone figuring it out for themselves, safely, consensually, and without shame.
If you learned something today, sit with it. If something challenged you, interrogate it. And if something resonated, explore it.
You can find out more of our work, our art, and everything bad at boudoirafterdark.com.
And if you're brave enough to keep learning with us,
We'll see you next time. Stay curious.
stay unapologetic.
Stay bad.
You are my toy.
The Boudoir After Dark podcast is brought to you by Boudoir After Dark, creating photo and video art for the unapologetically erotic. The podcast is produced by Jason Osterkamp, Hilda Burke, and Donna Van. Music by Temple of Hunger.
Given. Break from me. Give me your everything.
Meanwhile, a few moments later.
The other thing is I would really love to recommend that you guys talk to my mentor, who is also a kinkster, and her name is DocuRock, and she is the founder of Therapeutic BDSM, TM. It would be an amazing person for you to talk about, like, how is academia in kink? I can talk a little about that, but I want to name that, like, she is my, like...
What's her name?
I'm a bad